Hey, Bruins fam. Before we air this week's episode about Marat Khusnutdinov, we wanted to share some thoughts about the new Bruins head coach, Marco Sturm.
As I'm listening to the Bruins press conference officially welcoming Marco Sturm as their newest head coach, in listening to Marco talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this current roster as constructed, it struck me how painfully far away the Boston Bruins are to returning to championship caliber form based on what we're seeing in the Stanley Cup Finals. The road to a rebuild for the Boston Bruins is likely going to be long and hard, simply based on what I'm seeing out of the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, if that is what the Bruins will aspire to be again, which is a playoff contending team. And while I appreciate Marco's enthusiasm and his candor in how he spoke about the strengths and weaknesses of the Boston Bruins as currently constructed, it's very hard to garner an enormous amount of enthusiasm for a new head coach when you have really no true idea what your roster is going to be come opening day. I hope that Marco is ready for what is going to be an extreme challenge for him, because this is a fan base that is not going to suffer fools lightly any longer. And if things don't trend upward for the Boston Bruins, my fear is that our management team will once again be looking for a fall guy, and I would hate to have that fall guy be Marco Sturm. It's very difficult for any of us to assess what kind of a job a new head coach will or won't do until you know what he or she will have to work with. This is one step in the right direction. I will give management that much due. However, we need to see what changes will be made to the roster, who stays and who goes, before any of us can have any forethought into potentially what this Bruins team can or can't do for the upcoming season.
I completely agree with Maria. In addition to her comments, I want to throw out some shade to Kevin DuPont from the Globe. At 41:03 in the press conference, this Mensa candidate asked a legitimate question cloaked in misogyny.
Marco, Kevin DuPont again. I'm curious about the one position open on the coaching staff from a variety of areas. You think more in terms of an old guy, a young guy, special teams person, a new guy, or that spectrum of associate coach? And lastly, and be careful with this, with your wife and daughter here, would you consider a woman for that position?
So, Kevin, what did you mean by that moronic comment? Please do tell me. Because it sure sounds like you would assume that a woman behind the bench means that something inappropriate would happen, and that there's something inappropriate in a coach wanting a woman behind the bench. But it's only something that the women in your family shouldn't hear about, right? It's okay for the boys to hear about it? Grow up and go away, you ass. Anyways, enjoy the show.
Okay. Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Send it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Potter right in and goalie scores. Oh my, what a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pasternak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score! The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand. Score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pasternak is there. He scores! David Pasternak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm your host this evening, Caroline with a K, and this is our next episode about our trade deadline acquisitions for the Boston Bruins. You're listening in on June 11th, and I am here with my fantastic co-host, Maria from Watertown. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Caroline. What's going on?
Oh, you know, living the dream, waiting for October to come around.
It seems like an eternity since we have seen the black and gold on the ice. This has been unusual waters for fans of the Boston Bruins this season. But you know, we're here to try to make everyone feel a little bit better about the Bruins roster.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Isn't that what we're gonna do?
Obviously. And as we get closer and closer to free agency, it's yet another kind of tricky season because there are a lot of different rules and a lot of different things to understand about these contracts. What's a UFA? What's an RFA?
RFA.
What does all this mean? And so one of the interesting results, I suppose, of this year's trade deadline is the fact that the Boston Bruins acquired 3 RFAs, restricted free agents. So not exactly what you would call a rental, which is what you might call someone who was a UFA. They have the right to go wherever the heck they want to go.
Yep.
RFAs are a completely different beast, and there are 2 different kinds of RFAs. And the kind of RFA that you are depends on how long you have been in
the league,
the business.
Yep.
So today we're going to be talking about Marat Khusnutdinov, which I was just thinking about this the other day and kind of chuckling to myself. Boy, did we struggle with his name. And now I
couldn't even say it. Now it just rolls right off the tongue. Marat Khusnutdinov.
Just don't ask me to spell it yet.
Yeah. I just needed to say it like he was part Italian, so it would just roll off my tongue.
Exactly. So Khusnutdinov was part of a package deal that included former Boston Bruin Jacob Lauko, who we'll talk about in next week's episode. And the 2 of them came to Boston for Justin Brazeau, who was actually having a pretty good year. He, basically was with Boston for a little over a year because he had signed the previous February. And then his year kind of plateaued and stopped improving, which was kind of a bummer. But I know, and I'll speak for myself, and I'm sure you agree in this, that last year when Jacob Lauko was traded away, I was a little sad.
All the tools.
He was great.
No,
I
was
loved
too.
his personality.
Yeah.
But, again, we're going to talk about him next week. But so I was thrilled to see him, but I was intrigued by this young Russian player who apparently barely speaks English. That's how new he is.
Yeah, I think he and Zadorov quickly became BFFs.
Yes. Well, and if you recall from last August when we did our player profiles on some of our new signees, Zadorov was one of the first, Russians to sign with Boston in quite a while.
Yes.
We had Orlov. We traded for him. He was a rental. That doesn't really count. And so I was intrigued by how a Russian player would fare on the Boston Bruins because typically they have not gone far. It's just correlation is not equal causation, but interesting tidbit. And now we have 2. So I'll give you the quick rundown on Khusnutdinov, what his deal is, kind of what he did for Boston in the short period of time that he was with us, and then we'll get your take. But first, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
Yay.
All right, Bruins fans, if you're thinking about picking up some new gear, now's the time. I'm already planning to grab a fresh Pasternak jersey this fall. Who knows? Maybe he's rocking a new letter on the front. The NHL shop is running tons of season-ending and summer sales right now, including 20% off Fanatics gear. And here's the best part. When you shop through our link in the show notes, a portion of your purchases helps support this podcast. Same gear you'd find at the pro shop, but with way better perks. So stock up, save big, and help keep Bruins Tape to Tape rolling all year long.
The fastest game on the ice just hit another gear. Welcome to the Stanley Cup playoffs, where legends are made and every shift could turn the tide. And now, with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you can take every slap shot, breakaway, and overtime thriller to the next level. New to betting on the Stanley Cup playoffs? You're in for an exciting time. Getting started is a breeze. Fire up the DraftKings Sportsbook app, pick your team to win, lock in your wager, and you're off to the races. It's fast, simple, and puts you right in the middle of the action. Don't have a dog in the fight? It's easy to pick an anytime goal scorer who's going to score the game-winning goal in overtime. It's just that simple. Here's the kicker. New customers who bet just $5 will score $300 in bonus bets if their wager hits. That's right. Turn $5 into a playoff payout. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN. That's promo code THPN to unlock $300 in bonus bets when your $5 bet wins. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
So, we are back talking about Marat Khusnutdinov. He is a 22-year-old left-handed center, and let me tell you, you're going to be hearing about another left-handed center after this. We have them in spades right now, apparently.
He was centers. Drafted. Are they the right centers? But that's another question.
Khusnutdinov was drafted in the second round, 37th overall, back in 2020 by Minnesota. He played 75 games last season. He scored 5 goals, 7 assists. He got 12 points, and he was a minus 11. Kind of a theme, as we talked about last week with Middlestat being in the red as well. And I believe our remaining players, at least one more, also in the red.
We do. In defense of us pointing that out.
Yes.
As far as their tenure with the Boston Bruins on this season, we went from having a defensive structure that some nights was non-existent.
Yeah.
And for those players who also spent time on the penalty kill unit, our goaltending wasn't up to par. Our defensive structure wasn't up to par. Our, penalty kill units were not up to par. We were giving up more goals. So again, we point these stats out because they're stats. However, they shouldn't define the be all and end all for these players because they came into, let's face facts, a shitty situation. Okay. There's no other way to put it. They came to the Bruins at a shitty time.
Yeah. Not a good time.
No.
So also, now keep in mind, again, he's 22 years old. He's a bit younger. He's newer in the league. He's currently, playing fourth line minutes. So, his stats might not knock your socks off. But again, keep in mind, this guy is super young. I think he's going to have a lot to show. And being an RFA, unless Boston really doesn't feel like keeping him around, they're going to hold on to him. So just two other quick stats for you. His Corsi 4, which is basically, how many times he's making an attempt. His percentage there was 42.5. So also not particularly spectacular, but, and again, a large percentage of his season was in Minnesota. So not knowing really what their system was, what they were all about, hard to really judge, but not awesome. However, if you recall from last week's episode, my favorite statistic, one of them being the individual points percentage, again, considering for all the goals that player is on the ice for, how many of those did he touch where he got a point? He was actually in really good shape. He had a 71.43 individual points percentage. And if you consider the fact that he's getting, maybe third line, fourth line minutes, that's relatively impactful. So that says a lot. That's something that he could potentially contribute to Boston. Now, the last thing I want to kind of run down before we talk about him a little bit is, again, his RFA status. So he's a restricted free agent, particularly because of his age. He's 22 years old. He's definitely not, worked in the NHL long enough. So he's also coming off of his first contract in the NHL. So he now has arbitration rights. So he's known as an RFA ARB, if you will. And so this means that the Boston Bruins can retain his negotiating rights and can extend a qualifying offer to maintain those rights. If they cannot agree on a new contract, Khusnutdinov now has the option to file for salary arbitration, allowing the independent arbiter to come in and determine the salary. If you recall, obviously, the highly painful situation with Jeremy Swayman.
I was just going to go there.
RFA with arbitration rights. But so was Trent Frederick a couple of seasons ago as well. So, again, being an RFA means the player cannot choose directly to leave the team as if he were an unrestricted free agent, which means he can go wherever he wants. He wants to stay, he can try and negotiate a deal there. If he doesn't want to stay, he can go someplace else. Boston is the one that has to kind of break up with him. Again, that's how we got Morgan Geeky. So knowing this, seeing a little bit of what he had to offer, what are your thoughts on Marat Khusnutdinov? Do you expect a qualifying offer? What do you think is going to happen with this guy?
I think the Bruins want to keep him.
Mm-hmm.
I think they want to keep him at a price that works for them. I don't know what this young man might be looking for. Again, he's only 22. He's only 22 years old. He likely wants to, I would guess, not be a player that is being moved from team to team to team. I think it's really helpful to have a veteran like Nikita Zadorov, on the same team with him to help guide him along, both, with a little bit of the language barrier that he's still working through.
Yep.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to take the same Maria from Watertown Company line when it comes to young players.
Yeah.
The Bruins need to fish or cut bait, which to me is, right, You finally need to
Yep.
decide that you're going to make the commitment
Yep.
to help grow and develop
Yeah.
a young player like Marat. Put him in the right spot. For me, that would be fourth line,
Yeah.
right? And again, you get yourself into a situation where he starts right in, training camp day, and he's showing you that maybe, he can handle more than that,
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
awesome. But,
Yep.
these again, and because these are restricted free agents, my other hesitation is the bungling boobs that manage Boston Bruins and how they conduct themselves when it comes to these types of negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he might spend any time down in Providence? I mean, he clearly didn't do that last season in Minnesota because he ended up with a grand total of 75 games, or if he did, it was very brief. Do you think that that could be something that happens?
I think it's dependent on how the rest of your roster starts to look
Mm-hmm.
and what you do at the draft with the
Mm.
draft picks that you have.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, when there's a new coach in place, training camp opens, rookie camp, right? These
Mm-hmm.
players are all going to be told in no uncertain terms. There are jobs. You need to earn your jobs.
Yeah, for
There will
sure.
be, there'll be structure, there'll be competition, there'll be guidance. A lot of that, to me, depends on what are you putting together here for these young players?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think I'll be really curious to see how he does at camp. I mean, let's be honest. I'm super curious about this year's camp in general.
In general, because it was such a,
So many things.
well,
So many
again,
things.
this is the spin that we get, that it was, camp sounded like a shit show,
I mean, we
There's no-
commented on that ages ago, when it happened.
Right. We didn't need Cam and Dawn
To
telling
tell us
us
this.
that.
No.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see how he does there. And then, I fully expect them to retain his rights. They're going to give him, I mean, contractually, they're obligated to give him a pay bump per, the minimum increase, very similar to a cost of living increase that you or I might get at work. So, I certainly don't think that they're going to be offering him any kind of significant extension. He's
Right.
eligible for that as part of the deal, July 1st.
What was he making when he came to us?
League minimum, I believe.
Okay.
Now I have to check.
I'm just curious.
Oh, no. He was making a lot more. So his cap hit was the 925, which is just above league minimum. But he was eligible for bonuses this year as well. So he
Okay.
had an AAV of $1.35 million, and a bonus of $850, signing bonus of, 92,000. So 925, I mean, still basically minimum wage in the NHL.
Yeah. I mean,
He'll probably get bumped up to
he'll get a little bump. He'll get a little bump again. He is only
only 22.
only 22. He's still got things to prove.
Right. He's not a, super phenom or what have you, but I liked what I saw out there. I liked, his presence on the ice, he was where he needed to be, obviously with a 71.4 individual points percentage. He was on the ice when he needed to be on the ice. Unfortunately, he was also on the ice when things were not going well.
I know, but you know what? I had brought that up before, but that was the case for virtually, anybody on that roster not named Morgan Geekie or David Pastrnak, right? So,
right. Yeah. So, and he wants to stay in Boston per Nesson. So, he's going to be motivated to stick around and probably say yes to whatever they give him. And I think it's probably going to be fair. When you're looking at his player usage.
Did you say fair and Boston Bruins? Are you all right?
When they cost this little,
yes,
it's fair.
Yeah.
It's the only time he's going to get a fair deal in Boston. Because they're contractually obligated to give him an increase as an RFA. So that's literally it. So again, he is another one that I think he's going to show us a lot of what kind of player he is that with a full year under his belt in Boston. If he were part of a trade package, Maria, how would you feel about that?
I mean, again, I would feel okay for the young man because I think you might be better served just because, I don't have a ton of faith and confidence in how we have worked with and developed young players. That, and again, I feel like I'm regurgitating the same thing from the prior episode, but do you have faith in how the organization has handled some of our younger players that were supposed to be something, right?
If they require,
you invested high draft picks,
right,
in choosing these players, and then the eventuality is you wind up either they don't meet their full potential, you end up trading them, and then they do meet a little bit higher potential. So is it the player or is it you guys?
Yeah. No, I think I completely agree with you, because if a player comes into Boston, and we kind of talked about this in the last episode, that if they require any degree of polish, I start to get a little nervous. So again, Jack Studnicka is a great example in recent times. He wasn't David Pastrnak. He needed polish, he needed development, and he kind of got hung out to dry. And his career, I think, it cost him his career, quite frankly. David Pastrnak is different because David Pastrnak didn't really need any polishing.
Right.
Patrice Bergeron didn't need any developing. Brad Marchand didn't need developing. That's why I'm worried about.
Brad Marchand started when camp started. He was fourth line. He was fourth line.
Exactly.
He was sent down to Providence, came back, and then again, he is not on the same stratosphere as David Pastrnak, but he turned himself into an elite player. Now, I want to have faith because things went so poorly this past season for the Bruins that there hopefully have been a lot of lessons learned in that we have got to do better by these young players.
Yeah.
They're going to make mistakes. How many times did we say last season, right?
Right.
How could this possibly get any worse? Just bring some of those young guys up from Providence. They're going to make mistakes anyway. Are their mistakes going to be any worse than the mistakes we watched veterans players make?
No, because if we're going to lose, who cares if we lose by 3 goals or we lose by 10 goals? If the loss is coming, you might as well invest in some of that youth. And this is also why I do worry about Matt Patra, and I worry about someone like Khusnutdinov, because both of them are so young.
Yes.
This is going to be a really critical period in their development in terms of how they can take their game to the next level. And I think that from what I saw from Khusnutdinov, again, he requires some polish, he requires some education, all of these things. But what do you expect when you walk into a room, participate on a team where it's just complete and utter chaos? No lessons can be learned other than, well, this was hard, not just like necessarily physically, but like, emotionally and psychologically, to be on a team when everybody is so down. So maybe he got a little bit of a emotional education, but that was about it, so.
Yeah. And there has to be an institutional change on their approach, because it's going to be really difficult. Like we can try to guesstimate all of this all we want.
Yeah.
But if the philosophical approach that the organization has with respect to young players doesn't change, it's the very definition of madness when you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you expect a different result. That is my concern and my fear for young players like Khusnutdinov and Middlestat. They still need guidance.
Right.
And I know you're not in the business of doing that, but you just had one of the worst years in franchise history. So you got to start somewhere. And if it means with, giving these young players that you acquired, you agreed to take them, then you have to make that commitment and you need to see it through.
Exactly. So that's all she wrote about Marat Khusnutdinov. Any final thoughts, Maria?
I just want this. I just am looking forward to the Bruins doing something of significance come July 1.
Yeah.
I hope that I'm not going to be disappointed. But
yeah,
we shall see. I mean, it's the same management duo in place. So I'm not sure how much is going to change. But again, hopefully that was what happened last season, was a big enough bucket of cold water thrown on top of both their heads to wake them the hell up.
Yeah, I would have to think at least that at minimum. But as always, make sure you rate and review so we can
follow us on social.
Yes. So that way others can find us. And as always, go Bees.
Go Bees.